They called him the King of Cool. But that day, on stage 4, he was the only man in the room who hadn't had a drop. The soundstage hummed with noise. Cameras rolled on their tracks. The band hit brass notes, and hot lights burned down on Dean Martin as he stood on his mark with a rocks glass in his hand. The crew expected the same act as always: the lazy grin, the fake stumble, the harmless drunk they gathered around at night. Up in the control booth, producer Ray Hennessy watched like a hawk. He wanted louder laughs, faster jokes, and Judy Garland closing the hour in a blaze of color, no matter how she walked in the door. Dean turned the glass slowly, listening to the ice click. By the stage door, he spotted a guard in a cheap blazer, studying him instead of the crowd. You remember that smile and that glass. Where are you watching from tonight, and what did you think was in it? On the floor, the warm-up band slipped into a slow shuffle while grips rolled a fake bar into place. A red line of tape marked off the hot part of the stage, where only cast and crew were allowed. Dean stepped down for a smoke and a stretch, glass still in hand, when the side door banged open. From the doorway, a small woman in big dark glasses peered in. Her coat seemed too heavy for the heat. She took one step, missed the edge of the ramp, and wobbled. Before anyone else moved, the gray-haired guard in the cheap blazer rushed past the tape. "Easy there, ma'am," he said, catching her elbow. "Watch that lip." Judy Garland pushed back her glasses. Her eyes were red, but her smile tried to do the same old dance. "I'm fine," she whispered. "Just a bad step." Up in the booth, Ray jabbed a button. "Get that guard off my stage," his voice boomed from a speaker. The stage manager, Eddie, hurried over. "Frank, you can't be past the line. You know the rule." Frank straightened, still holding Judy's arm. His badge on the belt looked small, more toy than shield. "The rules say let a lady fall?" he asked. His voice carried farther than he meant. Crew stopped what they were doing. A camera operator glanced at Dean. The room went quiet, like someone had hit a switch. Ray's voice snapped again. "Move him, Eddie, now. We're not running a clinic here." Dean watched Frank's hand. The fingers on Judy's sleeve shook, but he didn't let go. Under the glare of the lamps, one old guard had stepped over more than tape, and everybody there felt it. Dean felt something tighten in his chest, a warning he hadn't heard in years before. Eddie caught Frank's sleeve before the argument got worse and steered him toward the side door. Dean drifted after them, still holding his glass. Down a narrow hall of gray walls and buzzing lights, Eddie pushed open a cramped office. Schedules and cue sheets covered one wall. A dented metal desk sat in the center, next to a soda machine. Ray was already there, tie loose, headset hanging around his neck. "What do you think you're doing, hero?" Ray said. "You're here to watch that door, not stage a rescue." Frank stood in front of the desk, hands open, shoulders tight. "She was falling, I grabbed her. That's the job where I come from." Ray snorted. "Where you come from, huh? You're a night guard on a TV lot, pal." Dean set his glass on the filing cabinet. "Let the man talk, Ray," he said, voice softer. "We've got a little time before next setup." Frank's eyes moved from Ray to Dean, then down to the floor. "I used to wear a badge that counted. Sheriff, Pima County, 20 years. Then the bottle took it. Took my wife, too. Took my girl." Eddie shifted, unsure. "You lost your job over drinking?" "They took the star off my chest and told me to go home. Only home was already gone. My daughter died hating me. Her boy's all I've got. Judge says I slip once, they'll take him too."
A thin folder sat on the desk, his name on the tab. Ray tapped it. "All that's in here," he said. "You step out of line again, I don't just fire you, I call that social worker myself." Dean looked at the folder, then at Frank's face, and the joke in his glass finally tasted sour. When Ray finally waved them out of the office, the air in the hallway felt thick. Eddie hurried back toward the stage, papers flapping in his hand. Dean touched Frank's arm. "Come on, pal," he said. "You look like you need air." They stepped through a steel door onto the loading dock. Heat rose from the concrete. Trucks sat back to the bay, engines quiet, a strip of sky showing over the studio wall. On a splintered bench by the door, a skinny boy in a clean shirt swung his legs and studied a visitor badge pinned crooked to his chest. A beat-up glove rested beside him. When he saw Frank, he straightened. "Grandpa, you were gone a long time," he said. His eyes shifted to Dean and went wide. "Hey, you're Dean Martin." A woman with a clipboard stood a few feet away, pretending to read forms. She wore a county badge on a lanyard. Frank nodded toward her. "That's Miss Carter from Child Services," he murmured. "She brings him, she takes notes, she tells the judge if I'm steady enough to keep him." The words came out flat, steady, but Dean heard the fear under them. Danny looked at the glass in Dean's hand. "We watch your show," he said. "Grandpa laughs when you act wobbly. Mom used to say, 'That man's having fun every night.'" He grinned, unsure. "Is it fun?" Dean felt the question land like a stone. The drink in his grip suddenly seemed heavier than the concrete dock. Behind Danny's shoulder, Miss Carter's pen scratched across her paper. "Judge thinks this job's rough. Security, late nights, booze on set. One mark more, they'll say it's no place for a child." Down the dock, Carl and Eddie smoked, eyes on Dean that day. Back inside, the cool air of the stage hit Dean's face. The loading dock smell of hot tar faded under dust and cables and old wood. Ray shouted to someone in the booth, but for a moment the noise seemed far away. Dean caught Frank's eye and tilted his head toward the edge of the set. Near the fake bar, a metal music stand held a clipboard with fresh visitor forms. The house lights were half down, most of the crew off on break. Dean picked up the board and a pen. "Do me a favor," he said. "Sign your name there. They're on me about passes." Frank took the pen. His fingers closed tight, knuckles white, but the tip scraped and shook across the paper. The letters crawled instead of flowed. As the ink wobbled, a picture flashed behind Frank's eyes. A pistol held on a dark road, barrel dancing when it should have been still. Later, a hospital chart gripped with the same twitch while a doctor said words he'd never forget. Sweat broke along his neck. He pressed harder. The pen squeaked. From a few feet away, Dean watched the tremor. His gaze slid from that shaky line of ink to the smooth glass on the fake bar, the one he'd be lifting in an hour, pretending to slur. One man's hands shook because of nights nobody laughed at. The other man just pretended, safe under jokes and lights. Off to the side, Carl tuned his horn, listening. Eddie flipped through cue cards, stealing looks. Linda from the union leaned against a wall, arms folded, taking it all in. Dean felt something click. This wasn't just about his act. It was about what their whole crew was selling. You've seen clean versions of drunks on screen. Have you ever watched a hand that can't sign its own name anymore? Dean had, now, and he knew he couldn't unsee it.
Call time snapped them back. A buzzer sounded, and Eddie's voice echoed across the dark room. "Places for the top, everybody. Let's run it clean." Dean walked to his mark. The fake bar gleamed under fresh light. A fresh glass waited, beads of water on the side. He set it down instead of picking it up. Carl lifted his hand, counted the band in with a soft 4, and the first tune rolled out smooth as a river. When Dean opened his mouth, the old patter didn't come. No lazy slur, no wobble. He sang the verse straight, clear, each word landing like he meant it. A couple of grips glanced up. Even the warm-up crowd in the bleachers went still, listening harder than they had all day. Near the curtain, Judy stood half in shadow, one hand on a rail, her head tilted, like she was hearing a different man. From the booth, Ray stabbed a button. "Cut that," he barked into the speaker. "Dean, what are you doing? That bit plays because you're loose. Pick up the drink, give him the shimmy." Dean shaded his eyes toward the glass. "Maybe we ease off that tonight," he said. "Feels tired." Ray came charging down the metal stairs, headset bouncing. "Tired as the checks that don't clear if you go flat," he snapped. "They buy the lovable lush, that's the brand." Linda, by the wall, folded her arms. Carl let his trumpet rest at his side. Eddie stared at the floor, caught between the man on the floor and the boss in charge. Dean held Ray's gaze for a long beat, then nodded once. "We'll pick it up on the next pass," he murmured. As Ray stomped away, Dean saw how alone he'd just been. One man against a whole machine wouldn't change a thing. He'd need every friend he ever made if he wanted that glass to mean something else by showtime. In his dressing room, the noise of the stage dropped to a dull rumble, like a train far away. The mirror lights threw a warm circle around Dean as he loosened his tie and set the glass down on the counter, untouched. On the small table by the door, a sweating bottle of ginger ale waited beside a silver tray. Dean cracked it open and poured, the hiss loud in the quiet room. "This is all it's been for years," he said. "Looks good on camera when they swap it out. Folks at home never know." He looked over. "Sit down, Frank." Frank sat on the edge of a low couch, hat in his hands. For a long moment, he watched the fizz rise. "Wish I'd found that trick sooner," he answered. "I thought I could still wear the badge and drink like the boys." Dean rubbed his jaw. "What happened?" "One night, radio squawked about a wreck out on Route 19. I was face down on my own floor. Kid bled out before another deputy got there. Couple years later, my wife called from the hospital. I told her I'd be right in. Bottle beat me there. She was gone when I woke up." His voice cracked once, then steadied. "Judge read every line of that into the record when they talked about Danny." Across the room, Dean's shoulders slumped. "My boy started doing my bits at parties, stumbling, slurring, thinking it was cute. My girl asked Jean, 'Is Daddy ever not drinking?' I wasn't drunk half as much as people think, but I let the joke stand. Let my own kids believe it." He turned toward the door. "I can't fix those years. I can fix tonight. I talked to Carl, to Eddie, to Linda, to Martin from the sponsor. If I stand up and they stand back, Ray folds." Dean met Frank's eyes. "You back me in front of that kid of yours?" If this hits close to home, stay with this story and consider subscribing so you don't miss how this night ends. By evening, Stage 4 felt tight as a drum. A crowd filled the bleachers, clapping on cue while cameras glided into place and the band played soft. In the wings, Dean stood with jacket buttoned and glass full, the ice hardly moving. Judy Garland waited beside him, one hand on a steel post, eyes too bright. An hour earlier, he'd done his walk. Carl had promised to follow his lead. Linda from the union said they could stop a show for safety. And sponsor man Martin Steele told him, "If you think it's dangerous, I'm with you." Now the red numbers over camera 2 slid towards 0. As Judy stepped out, her foot caught a cable. Her knees sagged. She grabbed Dean's sleeve. "I can't do the funny stuff," she whispered. "Not tonight." Eddie called final marks from the floor. Dean lifted his free hand. "Hold it," he shouted. "Kill the music."
The band stopped. The room fell into a low, puzzled murmur. Ray thundered down from the booth, headset swinging. "What are you pulling, Dean? We're live in 3. Dean set his glass on the bar and stepped between Ray and Judy. "I'm not playing the clown drunk, and I'm not shoving her through a bit that'll break her." From the bandstand, Carl closed his horn case. "Bands with Dean," he called. Eddie told cameras to stand by and added that no one should roll with a guest that shaky. Linda walked into the light and reminded Ray that union rules allowed a stop for health. Near the aisle, Martin Steele said a collapse on live TV would cost the sponsor more than delay. For a breath, nothing moved. Then Ray dropped his clipboard. "Fine. Stool, piano, tight shots," he snapped. "Do it your way." When the red light over camera 2 finally went dark, the room let out a breath. The crowd in the bleachers stood and clapped, not wild, but long and warm. Judy and Dean stayed on their stools a moment after the band faded, hands linked while the applause washed over them. She gave his fingers a squeeze, eyes glassy but clear, then rose slowly with Eddie at her side. Ray spoke into his headset in short, sharp lines, already talking about edits, but even he didn't miss that the show had felt different. Nobody laughed at a drunk tonight. They'd watched 2 singers stand up straight. Backstage, as cables were coiled and lights cooled, Dean slipped away from the cluster around Judy and walked toward the stage door. The hallway smelled of sweat and hot dust. Frank stood near the fire exit with Danny and Miss Carter. The boy bounced, visitor badge crooked, eyes shining. "Grandpa, you were on TV," he said. "I saw you behind Mr. Martin when they cut to the band." Miss Carter held her clipboard close, but there was a small smile at the corner of her mouth. Dean stopped in front of them and unfastened one cufflink, the gold one he wore on nights like this. He pressed it into Frank's palm. "For the sheriff who told the truth," he said. "You changed the show, friend. You changed me." Danny stared, jaw loose. Frank swallowed hard. With his free hand, he reached into his pocket and brought out a worn metal chip, edges rubbed smooth. "1 year sober," he told Dean. "Every day, 1 more. I don't let many folks hold it." He set the coin in Dean's fingers for a moment. The metal felt heavier than any award he'd ever lifted on a stage. Years rolled by, and the world forgot the heat of that studio. Stage 4 held game shows now, shiny and loud, and most folks who had been there that night either retired or passed on. But on a quiet evening in a small house in the valley, the whole hour came back to life in front of a glowing screen. Danny Malloy, broader in the shoulders now and gray at the temples, sat on his couch with a plate of dinner gone cold. Beside him, his teenage son flipped through channels until a title card froze him mid-click. The Dean Martin Show, Judy Garland special. "That's old," the boy said. "You know this one, Dad?" Danny leaned forward. "I was there," he answered. The kid laughed, thought it was a joke, then caught his father's eyes and quieted down. On the screen, young Dean strolled out, crowd cheering, band bright. Only this time, Danny watched for tiny things other people missed. The full glass that stayed mostly untouched. The way he held Judy's hand a second longer when she sat. The slight tremor in the jaw when the close-up hit. A film host cut in between segments, talking over clipped footage. "Strange thing about this episode," the host said. "Dean drops almost all of his drunk shtick here. Afterward, bit by bit, that side of his act faded. Some say this night, and Judy's passing not long after, changed him." Danny's mind went to a worn chip in a drawer, his grandpa's 1-year token, into a single gold cufflink tucked in a small box. Frank had kept Danny, worked that studio job for years, and died sober. The judge's written notes still sat in a file. Guardianship continued, evidence of stability and character. Those few lines meant everything.
Some stories about Hollywood are all glitter and gossip, but nights like this one sit under the surface, shaping what you remember without you ever knowing why. On paper, it was only an hour of television. Dean Martin, Judy Garland, a crowd, some songs. In truth, it was an old crooner, an ex-sheriff, and a worn-out singer pushing back, together, against the lie that the bottle is always a joke. On that stage, Dean finally used the thing he'd spent a life building, not for himself, but to shield somebody else. Carl, Eddie, Linda, Martin, even the quiet folks on the rail followed his lead. Frank brought the kind of truth he can't fake, and Danny stood there learning the difference between a pretend drunk and a man carrying real regret. That's how the comfortable lie loses. One person says no more, and other people decide they won't look away. For men who grew up with these shows, it's easy to remember the laugh and forget the cost. The point of telling this story isn't to polish anybody's halo. Dean still had wreckage behind him. Frank still carried graves in his mind. Judy still walked a hard road. What changed that night was simple. For once, the cameras caught a little more truth than illusion. One singer chose care over shtick. One grandfather kept his grandson. One boy saw that real courage isn't never falling, it's standing back up where everybody can see the bruises. As you think about your own life, where do the beautiful lies still play, and who's waiting for you to tell the hard truth? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you want more Dean Martin, John Wayne, and old Hollywood stories told this way, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one.